Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt. Elijah Herbal is back at it, and we are loaded up. Good to be with you. Any updates? We will spin the wheel and say, sure, why not? With the Nebraska coaching search, we'll dive in and get some thoughts on some football and hoops with Mike Babcock. Some Tiger reaction from Mike Schuhart from Wilderness Ridge here in about 30 minutes. And I'm going to get some info, some insight in the 5 o'clock hour from some great minds as well. We'll hear from Jim Walden, former Nebraska assistant, coach in Iowa State, at Washington State. Jim's seen and done a lot in college football and is as wise as it gets. Get his take on that CEO opportunity that exists for Coach Frost. And you want to talk about the CEO part of the role being tested. Elijah, think about your busy week, right? You're about ready to graduate. You're getting things handled. You're nailing surveys. You're doing papers. You may or may not have a final to worry about, and you're wrapping up class. So that last semester, you're juggling. You're juggling a ton. I remember it well, but some of us on the show today are academic all-stars. Some are not. We'll let you determine who that is. Elijah's a pretty smart dude. So you're having to prioritize and knock out everything at a high level. Well, you want to talk about this welcome to CEO world? Scott Frost is doing the following this week. You're on the road recruiting. You're interviewing coaches. You're trying to figure out who can I get with this whacked out, shake up earthquake in the world of college football with some premier jobs open. Guys you want on staff still on the trail for other schools potentially. And then, oh, by the way, you've got some love that needs to be shown towards an Adrian, a Cam, and a Damian Daniels. Those are three big pillars for you for 2022, you can argue. So that's the trifecta, man. Interviewing, getting my staff put together, recruiting, keeping an eye or both on the portal, and then let's make sure Cam Jurgens and Damian Daniels and Adrian Martinez have an opportunity to come back. And while you're at it, start sweet-talking Austin Allen. Congrats, number 11, first-team All-Big Ten tight end. That is incredible. Cam Jurgens, third-team All-Big Ten center. Numbers to get in today at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio. Give us a follow on Twitter at Schmidt_radio and at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbal with Twitter. Chris at HailVarsity.com, the email. So, Elijah, you're hearing things, I'm hearing things, and I think the longer things go, it muddies things up if you're trying to land Mickey Joseph. I know we talked to Mitch Sherman yesterday. He made an incredible point. I've reached out to a couple of folks that know Mickey, and Mickey's got so much going for him. The fact he's been a really accomplished coach, he's recruited well, and he is New Orleans. He is Louisiana. He's well respected. It's not just that he's the homegrown kid. No, he's done really well down at LSU in his time. He's been responsible, along with Corey Raymond, for really making things hum with LSU football and their recruiting, as well as Bill Bush, who's here for Nebraska. So I think the best thing to say is this. It's going to happen when it happens. and that's obvious. But from a timeline and a tea leaf standpoint, listen, this decision and timing has all been affected with the process. The hiring process is all screwed up because of Brian Kelly leaving for LSU. And Brian Kelly today, talking to members of the media down there, has not made any decisions yet. This was right after his introductory press conference. He's not had any individual conversations. So, listen, the narrative isn't coming from him with who's here and who's gone. Coy Raymond's retained. He's your recruiting coordinator. But as Mitch mentioned, and we've kind of talked about, if we're weighing the pros and cons, if we're putting ourselves into Mickey Joseph's number 2 jersey, home or away, and you're weighing things out, you're busy. You're getting phone calls. You're getting phone calls from other programs. You've probably had phone calls from Nebraska. If you're Nebraska, how do you play this? Are you going to go the Notre Dame approach with Jack Schwarbrick? Well, fit's most important, so we'll wait. If you're Nebraska, are you going to wait for Mickey Joseph? And I think you should, absolutely. But you want to kind of get moving to round this thing out. So is there going to be an announcement Friday? Is it going to be Saturday? Is it going to be beginning of next week? I think everything's been pushed back for all 4 names you want. So if you can still get Mickey Joseph, if you let it be on his timeline, because if he gets punted by LSU, idiotic decision, but you get paid for 2 years, and you get the Bill Bush kind of rate where someone else is paying a money salary, and not that that's a huge thing, but it's a reality. Collect what you're owed if you're Mickey Joseph, if you're not retained. If you are retained, get a bump and keep doing your thing. And lastly, the appeal of Nebraska. Barry Switzer said something yesterday to Adam Rittenberg about and Barry's. He's a national treasure, but just being able to recruit off of tradition can't happen. You're not guaranteed to live in the neighborhood you've lived in for so many years. And Nebraska's case in point, when you make a move from the Big 12 to the Big 10, it's been rough. And it's been rough with coaching changes. Oklahoma's a bit worried right now. We'll see if they end up going with defensive-minded Brent Venables. That sounds to me like the guy. There was some scuttlebutt about Matt Rule. Don't know if that's a reality or not. I've heard conflicting reports on that. But to Mickey Joseph, you wait and you just get a yes. And if I'm wrong tomorrow, if at 5:30 Mickey Joseph, the news comes down that he's in, awesome. But if I'm a betting man, I don't think he's headed to Lincoln. Been wrong before, will be wrong again. I just think it makes too much sense. The only thing Brian Kelly has in common in Louisiana is his faith, and that there's a number of Catholics down there. God love him. Other than that, you need all the Mickey Josephs in the world as part of your staff that can go to inner city Louisiana, I should say New Orleans, can go to the rural parts of Louisiana, and you're accomplished. Mm-hmm. So it's a monster tough sell for Nebraska or anybody else knocking on Mickey's door, and he's still recruiting. And he's still going into living rooms for LSU. At least that was the case as of last night. So I think that light might be dimming on Mickey. Donovan Raiola is the other name that we're hearing a lot about. I've checked in again with some buddies in Hawaii that are closer to the Raiola crew. And, I mean, that's intriguing. And the more I hear about Raiola, the better I feel. Yesterday I felt like, well, is Nebraska settling? And I know you, Elijah, were kind of intrigued at what Army does, what their offensive line configuration's been like.
Well, to get back to Joseph briefly, there's just been so much smoke with Mickey Joseph this week that you got to think there's some sort of fire there. But then I
have no doubt Nebraska's reached out.
Yeah, but the question becomes, whenever it's been this long, and he's got a new head coach coming in who I'm sure he's been in contact with, and he still hasn't said yes to Nebraska, it starts to worry you. And especially with how fluid the coaching carousel has been this offseason, you don't know what it's going to look like 48 hours from now, let alone a week from now. Can you afford to wait for a guy to make a decision? I mean, you got to have a plan B ready to go immediately if Mickey Joseph's not your guy. So the question becomes, who is Nebraska talking to now, assuming Mickey Joseph is now not going to happen, just because, I don't know, it's been long enough now that I think Mickey Joseph has had time to ponder this.
Oh, completely. And Mickey's got to do what's best for him. What's his best move? Put yourself in his shoes. If you get a chance to stay, why wouldn't you? Period. End of discussion. Don't care as important as that red N is to him. Why would you?
You have a chance to coach under one of the most experienced and prolific coaches in college football, currently coaching in the sport right now.
Well, listen, as far as reasons to stay, working for Brian Kelly and making my top 5.
Fair enough.
But from a success standpoint, now the other side of this is, here's the other thing. What's Mickey's big picture? He's early 50s. By mid-50s, does he want a job, a chance as a head coach? What lanes do you want to be in? And if you come to Nebraska as recruiting coordinator and wide receivers coach, do you eventually maybe get a bump up to a head coaching job somewhere? Do you have a better chance of doing that in Lincoln? Do you have a better chance of doing that while down at LSU? His comfort zone's been the South. And he's worked from GA to high school coach to La Tech to JUCO. I mean, he has done it all, man. He has grinded. He has earned it. He has worked his way up, and he's developed a 3-star wideout named Jamar Chase and many, many others. Okay, so it isn't like all this NFL talent's falling into his lap. There are kernels of NFL talent that he has helped develop into flat-out must-see Sunday guys. So there's that question. The O-line part, and you need this configuration. We still don't know what the hell's going on with OC.
Well, can I get your take on this? What do you think the more important hire is whenever you look at what happened with Nebraska's offense this year? I mean, we know
it's offensive line.
I mean, you know the Scott Frost offense has potential, but the downfall this year was that you couldn't get a running game going and you couldn't protect your quarterback. And the offense was still doing well statistically in spite of the offensive line. So you know the offense can work, but so I'm with you on this one. You got to think the offensive line coach is the most important position to get right this offseason.
Well, and the other question is this. You get a phone call from Scott Frost right now or Trev Alberts, well, from Scott Frost right now. You're going to listen. You're going to weigh it. There are better options. The one saving grace as far as where Nebraska's at right now is that you're not out trying to go get a head coach. Mm-hmm. With everything that's shaken up. Not that you couldn't have found somebody, but you want to talk about the old line to the buffet after Sunday church? There are names and bodies dropping out because they're being hired, but it was a long, long line, and that would have been tough for Nebraska.
It's going to be interesting looking ahead here at future coaching carousels after this year to see what the
never again like this one.
You don't think so? Well, I think it depends on how Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly do early on in their tenures at USC. If USC is going 10-2 next season after you paid your coach $100 million to come, other schools in the country are going to look at that and go, well, if we want success, maybe we need to dish out $100 million to go find success. And it's the same with Brian Kelly down at LSU. If he finds success immediately, you got to think that this might have lasting results, lasting reverberations throughout college football. And you wonder, well, what's the coaching carousel going to look like next year? But on the flip side of things, if these big swings end up being misses on guys like Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, which I don't think they will be, but if they do end up being swings and misses, you might have a return back to normalcy next year. So it's going to be interesting to track, especially how those two coaches do in their first year at their new schools.
My question is this. When and if a reset year happens, what's it look like? Is SC 8-4 in the Holiday Bowl? Is Notre Dame 8-5 in Music City? Just throwing out names. And how often do you have reset years? Okay, Nebraska's trying to get to a reset year where You've won 8 or 9 ball games, and you fall back to a 6-6 or a 7-5. Minnesota's had them. Wisconsin's had them. Iowa's had them. Penn State's had a couple recently in a row. This feels more like a reset year in their context for Ohio State at 10-2. This is the jump year for Michigan. So a guy that can help have more winning and fewer reset years or the Mickey Josephs of the world in finding that right offensive line coach. It is important in the world of offensive line coaches. You can find coaches that are in position because of being on staff. I mean, LSU's offensive line coach, he's the acting head coach right now. That guy's pretty well respected. Pretty sure he was at Doane with Tommy Frazier. So there's that option as well. You have Raiola, but that's the name you hear. And he's done college work as a GA at Notre Dame. He's been with the Bears. He's learned under a pretty good guy. Now Bears fans will scream about the offensive line. I think there's talent, and I think it kind of comes down to streamlining and developing. They've got guys that can pass block. They have guys that can run block. You just got to be able to build some more depth and refine what you have. Because I promise you, there's a lot of football left for Ethan Piper. There's a lot of football left for Benhart. There's a lot of football left for Turner, for Neary. And you're praying there's a lot of football left for Cam Jurgens. You've seen him jump from a non-center to one of the best in the Big Ten. Mike Babcock will weigh in. Hail Varsity continues, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Hello, listener. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity Radio, and I wanted to let you know about a special deal just for listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast. We're offering $10 off the annual subscription price of $29.99. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we do. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Thanks for spending time. Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. The gentleman, Jim Walden, longtime coach and part of Nebraska, and Coach Devetti in about 35 minutes. His take on the carousel and what's the task at hand for Coach Frost with these hires. We welcome in historian, author, Hall of Famer, Husker insider with Hail Varsity, Mike Babcock at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, I started a long, strange trip on Amazon last night. I'm through 1.5 episodes of the Grateful Dead kind of documentary and kind of the vault stuff. It's really cool from the beginnings to when they were getting ready to kick off Europe 72. It's been a long, strange trip for this waiting game for the Nebraska fans to fill out this coaching staff. How are you?
I know. I'm doing well. I should be on after Jim Walden, then I could agree with everything he said. Sound pretty smart.
You'll do that anyway. You'll be good.
The only coach that, in 25 seasons, Tom Osborne only lost once to a team that finished the season with a losing record. Jim Walden, Iowa State, 1992.
Jim told me about that game a while back, and he still has a picture of the final scoreboard, 19-10, and that was right after whacking Colorado and Kansas and the prelude before OU and in Nebraska. Really good team in 92. Didn't show up in Ames that day. I think it took 45 minutes to play because they ran some option, Merv Seiler, and wasn't on TV. I just remember being heartbroken. I was down in Lawrence that weekend watching Colorado, Kansas, went down with some family members who was at KU. And that was the Big 8 game of the weekend, right? Who's going to be the co-Big 8 kind of front runner with Nebraska. Nebraska had beaten both of them, and everyone gets back to the fraternity house after Colorado escapes Lawrence with a win, and Everyone just looks like their blood has been drained because Nebraska did lose in Ames, and Jimmy Walden still has that picture in his office to make sure the score doesn't change.
Yeah, and you're right. You know, it seemed like, I remember being there, and it seemed like it was about 45 minutes and it was over. It's like you looked at the final score, and it's like, this game's over with already? Because all they did was run the ball, and that's all Nebraska did.
And it didn't work out well. Weird ball game. Mike, shake the magic 8-ball, bud, with where things are at. Are you concerned that we don't have names yet, or is that just kind of what's going on because of the upheaval with the coaching carousel?
I think the upheaval, concerned, no. Confused, yes. I think it is. I think it's the coaching upheaval. And here's the thing that Nebraska fans probably don't want to hear. I don't know how attractive it is to come to Nebraska at this point. Do you? I mean, I know
it's a hard
tradition.
sell, buddy. It'd be a hard sell. There are folks out there, Mike, don't you think? But it's not a slam dunk. You got to be right. You got to be right because you got to get it done next year.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so you're coming into a situation where you might only have 1 year if you don't get it done to succeed, and then you might be looking for a job again. I mean, that's part of it, but I just think that where Nebraska has dropped in the whole scheme of things, and you look at the programs that are now looking to fill out staffs, making some changes and so forth, and the head coaches that are moving around and stuff, I just think it puts Nebraska in a more difficult situation than it was already in. It was already in a tough situation because of that, and you're going into you're coming into a place where the coach or whomever decided to get rid of 4 assistant coaches while the season was still going on, and now you only know for sure that you got 1 year. How does that play out?
Mike, do you think if Scott Frost could see how this coaching carousel would be going down this offseason with all the craziness that's already gone down in just a couple days, do you think that he still would make the decision to fire those 4 offensive assistants, or do you think he would have been a little bit more conservative in making staff changes, just knowing the craziness that was coming?
Well, I don't know if he knew the craziness that was coming, I don't pretend to understand everything that went into that decision. I don't think he was probably the only one that was involved in making the decision, and I don't think that was there were a lot of factors probably that went into it, and it wasn't an easy decision, obviously. I thought at the time, and I still think that it would have been better, had you waited till the end of the season. But if you had waited till the end of the season, then you would see how things are going, and maybe you would have thought a little differently about how you were going to approach things, because you did have guys that knew your system or that knew your players, had the connection there, I think that's important. I'm still interested to see what happens with the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. We've got a couple of running backs already headed out, and you got a couple of guys that. And I'm not talking about Cam Taylor-Britt and Austin Allen, but I think you've got a couple of guys that have decided that they're not going to come back for whatever reason, though they could. How that all plays out, it's just really when you hear coaches talking about the pieces of the puzzle. Coach Frost talks about putting those pieces together. Man, the pieces to me are just scrambled all over the puzzle board right now. Trying to put this stuff together.
Mike, to your point, think about being somebody that you want or target if you're Nebraska. And I think you got a couple of really awesome internal options that, and I'm going to keep beating this drum. Bill Bush, hope it happens, think it'll happen. Ron Brown, hope it happens, think it'll happen. So your 4 spots are now down to 2, but you still got OC, O-line, and potentially wide receivers coach, unless you have Ron do wideout or running back, or you double up Becton tight end wideout. I mean, you need a 5th spot, honestly, ideally, but that's not it. But think about being somebody It's pretty high level. That's been at some big time places before, and LSU could call you. OU could call you. Notre Dame could call you. SC could call you. Washington could call you. Florida could call you. And then there's Nebraska with make sure you're renting with an option to buy. And that's just it. That's just the reality right now. A thought on Donovan Raiola. Let's talk O-line. We've heard different O-line coaches mentioned. John Garrison, incredible setup, and what he's done at NC State speaks for itself. So he'd be doing Nebraska a favor. Mickey Joseph would be doing Nebraska a favor. But it's just, I don't know. Raiola is a guy that I think could work and do really well. And he seems, from a situational standpoint, we don't know what Chicago's future is going to be.
Yeah, that's true. There's some uncertainty there as well, and so that might be something that he would look at. I don't know if you how excited you would be to go from the NFL to college, kind of a thing. And I like the. Let's have a conversation with John Garrison. I like that, and I like the two that you mentioned. Can you keep Bill Bush on? Can you make him a full-time assistant, and can you get Ron Brown to basically come out of retirement from coaching and go back and do something? And he certainly could be either or, running backs or receivers, but. I would say probably running backs, just because I think that you probably need to let Sean Beckton work with the wide receivers and the tight ends to kind of open up another position there. I really, when this whole thing came about, back with 2 games left, I really hoped that there was a chance that, hey, maybe they could get Mickey Joseph because, LSU was in disarray there. The Ed Orgeron was going to be stepping aside and whatever, and then that all kind of hit the wall when Brian Kelly was hired. Because I think, as you've said, I think it would be foolish for him not to try to keep Mickey down there. And Mickey's, he's got the South and Louisiana are really where his connections are, his comfort zone, all the time that he spent there as a coach, not just at LSU, but Grambling and Louisiana Tech and high schools in the New Orleans area. And, he's really committed to that area to make it better and so forth. So, my thoughts about the chances to get Mickey Joseph are not good at this point. Even though that's the one guy that I thought, man, you could bring him in there. He could coach the quarterbacks. Even though he's been a wide receivers coach, he could coach the quarterbacks.
Good call.
And I think he would do a great job. I really believe that. And with his connections in the South, the recruiting would be really a positive. But I'm not optimistic about getting Mickey. I hope his name comes up. I hope there's some way they could convince him to come here. But all the things we've said about the uncertainty of this situation leads me to believe that he probably, if Brian Kelly isn't smart enough to realize how important it would be to keep him.
He has safer options. Mike, a little less than a minute, bud. A thought on hoops tonight, Nebraska, NC State. You feeling all right for Fred and company?
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing how, because I think we'll learn a lot here tonight. I wish the women weren't playing at the same time, so I'd like to see how they do against Wake Forest as well. But I think we'll find out a little bit about both teams significantly tonight in these games. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Mike, we'll keep our ears open. You keep your ears open and the tea leaves, and we'll see if there's something by Friday or next week for Nebraska.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I probably agree with most of what Jimmy Walden says.
Mike, you're the best. Appreciate you much. Thanks again.
Take care. Take care.
There he is, Mike Babcock with us, historian, author, Hall of Famer, and exclusively with Hail Varsity, Mr. Husker football right there. So hurry up and be patient, Elijah. Got to be patient with that golf swing or that putt, the buffet line on Thanksgiving. I mean, all things. Mike Schuhart's going to be with us next. We'll get Shuey's take on Tiger.
Well, Schuhart is now officially listed as Golf Digest top coaches in the state of Nebraska.
Well, of course he is. Just go to him and find out why. He's next.
Hello, listener. This is Brandon Vogel, managing editor of Hail Varsity, and I wanted to let you know about a special deal just for listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast. We're offering $10 off the annual subscription price of $29.99. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce, 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at hailvarsity.com. Just go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's hailvarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We welcome into, as we know this time of year, we're going to watch A Christmas Story, and the old man's going to say it's a major award with the lamp, the leg lamp. A little bit better than that is being named to Golf Digest's best teachers in every state. We say hi. We've always known it, but now there's the award to go with what you knew. Mike Schuhart, Wilderness Ridge. Shuey, congrats on the honor, bud. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. That was a surprise. I just found that out yesterday, so pretty honored. Pretty cool group of guys that are on that list, so pretty fortunate to be on there.
Well, you're really awesome at what you do, as well as being a great golf teacher. How are you as an offensive coordinator? I'm asking for the state.
I don't think it's really that difficult in the sense that you know what you should do. Now, being able to implement it, that's a little more difficult. But, I mean, it's the thing that's been bothering me for I don't know how long. But it's like I just don't understand what is their reluctance to play football the way that they basically built their brand. Instead, they think they need to play a different way than what they've always played that made them successful, and they get beat by everybody that's doing exactly what they did in the 90s forever. I don't get it. It's just mind-boggling to me.
We'll see if it shifts around. What's your read on things being a coach like you are and also being a university coach as long as you were? What's your take on this timeline here and lack of any names right now?
I don't know. It's a little bit. I'm very confident they have their things positioned like they need to. I mean, it's a really crazy and difficult time because you got recruiting, you got the early signing period coming up, you're out trying to recruit, you got coaches I'm sure that you are interested in trying to get, but can you actually contact them? I mean, they're still playing, some of them. So it's like, and some of the guys that you want, are they even interested in coming? So, I mean, I don't envy those guys at all. I mean, that is going to be a difficult thing. And, I mean, they have to know what it is they're trying to do, what they want to do, and they have to find the right fit that helps them achieve that, and it's not just being able to be a good offense, a coordinator or a special teams coach or an offensive line coach. I mean, you got to be a good recruiter, you got to be a good communicator, you got to be a great developer, so, I mean, those guys just don't fall out of trees.
Well, yeah, Mike, I think that's why we're seeing these crazy numbers being thrown around this year in the college football carousel. When you're talking 10-year contracts worth $100 million, and when you see that, Mike, do you think that you got into the wrong profession? Because part of me thinks I did.
No kidding, I definitely did. It's like that's insane. I just don't. It's mind-boggling to me. You're going to pay these guys that kind of money. It's like, where's the money come for your staff then? I mean, you got to pay your staff something. It's like, It's crazy. I mean, they have a lot of booster money, I guess.
Should we get to switch gears, take away from Tiger Woods? I had a pretty good run. That's a pretty impressionable quote from Tiger as he sat down, and he's very thankful with his rebuilt right leg. What do you make of Tiger moving forward? He'll still show up to some of the big ones, but from a competitiveness standpoint, you know how he's wired, but we now truly, it feels like, have Tiger laying out that his expectation, his bar has got to change.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he had mentioned that in his thing, that he'll never be number one in the world. But he also said that doesn't mean I can't win a tournament. Mm-hmm. You know, he'll never be number one in the world because he can't play enough. That's why he'll never be number one. He's not going to play enough events. He's not going to be able to play a full schedule. So now he's changing his gears and seeing, you know, he's going to pick and choose his, I don't know how many, 5 tournaments, 3, 5, 6. You know, that's all going to depend on his health and his stamina and things like that. But, you know, if he picks the right 5 tournaments, that dude is so good. You know, he can win at any time. I mean, I watched that clip they had of him when he was out practicing. Man, that looks so good. And that's a guy on a rebuilt leg and a back, and I mean, he looks as good as ever. Now, does he have the stamina for 4 days? That's going to be another thing.
Chewy, what would it take? What does it take, stamina-wise, at his age? And he's still in really good shape, obviously, notwithstanding the horrific accident. But what does it take to be in contention, and challenge a run to be a top tenner?
Well, I mean, especially in today's game, he's going to have to pick the right golf course that kind of suits his game. Most of them do, but obviously in today's game it's so powerful. The guys hit it so far. So he's got to pick a golf course that he's not trying to overpower a golf course or match what some of these other guys do. So his precision is going to be a reward, like a Hilton Head, Colonial, courses like that are power is not of the utmost advantage on those golf courses. So just finding courses that fit what he's able to do now and maximize that. You know, he's not going to be able to go tee it up at a course that is a bomber's golf course because I'm sure he doesn't have that, especially for 4 days, putting that much pressure and torque and just the walking. You know, he's got to find the right golf course that fits his game, and he has to be sharp when he goes into the event, and in his stamina, basically more of his body. Can his body hold up for that length of time?
Mike, before we get you out of here, I got to ask you about the match because you called it Brooks Koepka beating Bryson DeChambeau, despite the fact that Bryson was the Vegas favorite. You called it. What insight did you have there?
Brooks is a little more calm, and he was going to beat him, and Bryson is a little more show. You know, he's out there for the show, putting on a show, and if he got on a roll, he would have been pretty tough. Brooks is too consistent. I mean, he's not as much of a showman as he is. He's a competitor, and he's playing to beat him, you know. And his game is more consistent throughout his whole game and what he does, you know. But again, Bryson could get on a roll, and he could be fabulous. Day in and day out, though, Brooks is way more consistent in everything that he does. So I just figured that would win out in the long run.
Shuey, about 20 seconds, bud. How are things, and is the golf course busy the next couple of days?
Oh, my gosh. You were talking earlier about the Christmas story. That's going to be like a Christmas golf story this year. We'll be playing golf on Christmas.
I hope so, man.
Instead of getting the sleigh out, you got to get your golf clubs out. It's been awesome. I mean, the weather's been fantastic. People are playing like crazy, and they should be. I mean, we don't get this weather very often this time of the year, so enjoying it.
Well, go see Santa Shuey. Get that membership to Wilderness Ridge, the swim-up bar this spring and summer. Shuey, we'll talk next week, bud. Thanks for jumping in.
You bet. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Pardon the interruption, but I'd like to save you some money. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity, and I wanted to offer listeners of this podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down this first hour, Jim Walden, Gentleman Jim, longtime coach, Iowa State, Washington State, Nebraska. His take on the carousel and the moves Frost must make. Big picture CEO, and of course, yes, the hires. Andy Markowski, the Pride of Ord, Husker basketball standout. His daughter, Alexis Markowski, doing awesome things at an early age for the Husker women. So we'll have a take on Nebraska men's and women's. They tip off at 6. I think ESPNU tonight for the men. I think the women are on. Is it ESPN Plus or BT? I got to double check that, but long and short. So let's stay with kind of an Iowa State theme with Jim Walden. What's your take here on Coach Campbell? I know Notre Dame said they're going to be patient for the right guy. We talked to Gaz yesterday about the Irish and where they go, and Fickle's it. Fickle's got to be it. You got to, if you really like the guy and you think you can get the guy, then be patient for him. That said, if you're Matt Campbell, are you just going to kind of bide your time for the next round? Because I'm shocked, and his season wasn't great. They weren't horrible, but they weren't 9-2, 10-2, 9-3, top 10. They didn't live up to the expectations this year. A lot of close ball games they lost, and Iowa State's done it with a lot of development and some sprinkled in really good players. If I'm Coach Campbell, I would have expected in a year, in an era where LSU, OU, Notre Dame, SC, Washington, and Florida are open, he'd be one of the names off the board. See ya. Peace out, Ames. Not the case right now. Now we know Oklahoma's still open. We know Notre Dame's still open. SC, Washington, Florida, LSU are filled. So you got Fickle, Campbell. Those are the names. But man, I'm shocked that if we could have foreseen into the future with all of these openings, Campbell's still at Iowa State.
Yeah, but is he worth a 10-year, $100 million contract? We don't know enough with him yet.
Well,
that's the problem. Is that's what we're at right now in this coaching carousel.
But it's no different
than
the $9 million electric fence, Doberman-filled yard buyout that Iowa State put in his contract. You have to pay a hell of a lot to get him out anyway. Not $100 million, but 2 years ago you were going to have to pay through the nose to get him out.
And at the moment, there's better names than Matt Campbell for these big schools. I like Matt Campbell.
There's better seasons to go with a name than Campbell, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see two guys here in a year with what is going to be open.
Well, it's also incredible here whenever you look at Iowa State and the talent they returned to this team this year and the results that didn't follow. So I wonder if that soured some teams off of Matt Campbell this offseason. Maybe teams that were thinking that'd be a good option for us come this offseason, saw how the season panned out and went, you know what, I think we can go elsewhere.
Well, I think you've got the old Cincinnati proof in the pudding, too. Mm-hmm. D'Antonio wins at Cincy, kills it at Sparty. Kelly wins at Cincy, does really well at Notre Dame. Luke Fickle wins at Cincy, playoff bound potentially. And then does he make the jump? Hour 2 coming up. Jim Walden, Andy Markowski, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Back into it, hour two. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. It's time to get caught up and get the reaction to the coaching carousel and some insight on the Big Red. The gentleman, a longtime coach with Coach DeVetti and Hall of Fame coach with Iowa State and Washington State. Jim Walden back with us. Coach, is your piggy bank screaming at you?
Well, you know, I'm glad. I wish I was a little younger, but that would make me sound, you know, you'd like to be 20 years younger, but I say, hell, who wouldn't? You know, so, but I laughed today. I was talking with a friend of mine, Smitty, and we were talking about Jake Dickert, who just got the head job at Washington State, and we laughed about that his first year's salary might, number one, is probably going to exceed my 31 years of coaching. And then we laughed. He says, well, we don't know what he's going to make, but there's rumors around the $2 million shot. The last guy was being paid $3 million. And I said, well, you know, we've come a long way. Since my first job at Washington State, I was making $42,000.
Wow.
Can you imagine? It's the same school. Pretty much the same agenda. Not a lot's changed. I mean, a lot better facilities by far, of course. But in reality, just think about that. From 1978 to 2021, it's gone from the head coach at that same school at $42,000. That's exactly what I made. No other. And I didn't have a. You know what amazes me too? We'll get off this. I know you got other stuff. But not only do they get $3 and $4 million to $11 million contract. Then they have incentives, which drives me crazy. It's like, well, wait a minute now. So if you get the X number of guys graduate, if you get to a bowl game, well, that's what you're supposed to do when you're making that kind of money. But anyway, it's gone from 1978 to 2021, it's gone from $42,000 flat rate. That was no other incentives, $42,000 to $3.3 million. Same school. That's amazing.
Well, it's been a crazy week, and I want to start off with a little Nebraska thought. And right now, Coach Frost is trying to fill out his 4 openings, and we'll see where it goes. Mickey Joseph's the popular name. You remember Mickey, quarterbacking for Nebraska. He's done an amazing job at LSU, and of course with the shakeup down there on the Bayou. If you're Coach Kelly, I think you're crazy not to find a way to keep a guy that's true in true New Orleans to keep that state locked down. But if you're Coach Frost, Coach Walden, you know what is your pitch? What's your ace, so to speak, up your sleeve, because you're really coaching for your job next year.
Yeah, and that makes it really hard, Schmitty. I don't know, did he release those guys themselves, or did they choose to leave?
No, he
one in the same.
He cut them loose, and he cut them loose with 2 games left in the season, so it wasn't even end of the year deal. Okay.
Well, here's my feeling. I think it's going to be real tough for him to find. If I were him, I would look really hard at some quality coaches who are losing their jobs. Now you say that sounds silly. Did you bring in losers? No, coaches aren't losers. They're one of 8 people, just like, let's say, the offensive coordinator at USC. Now, he's a really good football coach. He was here at Washington State. He was one of Mike Leach's guys. He was a quarterback at Texas Tech. I happen to know and think he's a really good coach. Well, right now, he's out of work. You're going to appeal to someone like that. The 1-year thing is not going to scare him. He's out of work. So if I were Frosty, I'd look really hard. And you just mentioned one right down there at LSU. And I promise you, you're on the right track. That's how I feel about a lot of these guys that are at these schools that are being released. Notre Dame, Oklahoma. I mean, that's the places I would go and look, because they're not afraid to walk into a one-year deal and help it get better, because the rewards are, if it happens, they're going to be highly rewarded. If it doesn't happen, they've been off the breadline for 1 year. Mm-hmm. So I just think that's where I would go if I were him.
Jim Walden's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, what did you do? How did you approach things? That first staff you put together and then that second staff you put together, did you have to make some hard calls between friendships versus the best coach available? How did you put that together?
Well, it was a little harder, and I mean, it's not easy. I don't care what I'm about to say. It doesn't make it any less difficult. But the thing that's a little bit easier today for the head coaches, Smitty, in my opinion, when you're paying a guy anywhere from $700,000 to $1.1 million, or even $500,000 to $800,000, and you've had him on your staff for 4 years or 8 years, you have been real strong and beneficial to that young man. You have put lots of money in his pocket. In my day, when you took an assistant coach off and fired him, he probably wasn't making $45,000 or $32,000, and there was, I mean, it hurt. And don't give me that crap that, well, that was way back in the time when the dollar was bigger. Bull crap. I mean, there was some of that, but you're cutting a guy out of a lot. You've paid him so much more today than then. So I don't think it's quite as hard as it used to be, because they have been well paid. But it doesn't make it any easier. But sometimes it creates an environment of excitement in your staff. Well, the one just left, and you as a head coach, you're hearing new ideas, you're hearing new things. You think you know a lot of things that you've been doing, and all of a sudden two of your guys come in and tell you, well, we did this, and you went, wow, I wish I'd have thought of that. So there's some real positives about putting together a new staff and hearing new ideas and moving forward with that.
How was Coach Devaney when it came to listening to new ideas, whether you've been coaching 15 years or 5 months?
Oh, he was wonderful. I always used to think that was one of his greatest assets. One was his competitiveness. He had a fire in his belly when things weren't going right, man, and you know about it too. But he had a great knack for listening, and a wonderful knack. He'd come up and walk up to you on the field and ask you a question about something. Why did somebody do it? What are you doing that for? And even when it wasn't in the meeting room, he just said, well, Coach, we're doing this. We're taking that outside backer and following him underneath because they run this play. And you'd see him kind of put his hand on his chin and say, my God, but you always appreciate the fact that he was asking and listening. And in meetings is the same way. He didn't want to dominate the thing. He was there to make the final decision. But he was really good at listening to anybody. It wasn't just I will never forget when I came up from Amory High School. I was in the room with them, and I realized in about 3 days they covered everything I knew. But we were talking about audibles, and I said, well, here's what I did. We just did this. We just repeated the number, and then the next number was the hot call. And he said, that's good. And they debated it, and by God, they used it. So, I mean, it's like, that's how I knew I was working with the right guy.
From a delegation standpoint, Coach had high expectations with all his coaches and his kids. But from the CEO aspect, and that's something that Coach Frost is going to need to move more towards versus being so hands-on, yet you're the head coach, so it is your result. It's your baby, so to speak. So with Coach Devaney, Coach Walden, did he just give assignments and then kind of go over things in the meeting room? How did he delegate?
Well, everybody knew what their job was come Saturday. I mean, Tom Osborne was going to call the plays, and Carl Selmer and Cleet were going to be part of the involvement of Cleet was upstairs and Tom was upstairs, and they communicated. Mike was downstairs, but Tom pretty much was the guy that was going to call the play. And Coach Devaney knew that. Coach Devaney would meet with Tom when Tom met with the quarterback so that he was aware of what was being told to the quarterback, what checks you had, what plays you could get out of. So he was in the loop all the time. But Tom did the job there, and I think to his credit, even with Frost, you're talking about giving that up. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Smitty, Tom never did give that up.
No, he didn't.
I think he and so it's not like you can't be successful. In fact, sometimes, I mean, I never gave it up. I called the plays all 17 years I was a head coach. I used to sometimes wish I weren't so I could get more involved with the defense and listen to what they were doing, but it just didn't work out because my coaches didn't want me to give it up. And the same thing with Tom. Mm-hmm. And so I think Frost can do it. And I'll say this right now. I watched a half a dozen games this year at Nebraska, and I truly would love to say to him, and I'll say it to him if I ever got a chance, don't punish your coaches too badly, because I've never seen a team where it's the players shot themselves in the foot so much. And so much of that, Smitty, is stuff you can't coach them out of. I mean, to fumble a punt, to get a punt blocked, somebody forgets to, you can say, well, they forgot to block this and this and that and the other. Well, okay, that's fine. But Nebraska made a ton of little mistakes that cost them at least, I'm going to say at least 4, maybe 5 football games that you just don't expect to see that kind of thing happen. And so in some ways, they're on the right track. They just got to stop making kill-yourself plays.
Jim, I mean, you kind of got into the question I want to ask you next, and that's how much can a crop of new assistant coaches be able to change this team in only one offseason? Does it more come down to what the coaches are teaching or what the players are just doing on the field?
Well, I don't think you have to change too much. I'm of the opinion when you look at their overall season, start off with Illinois. They made enough mistakes just against Illinois, and that what happened, it just seemed like it never quit. Okay, well, let's get that stopped. It's not a matter, are we tackling poorly? Are we running the ball terrible? Are we throwing a lot of crappy passes? No, that wasn't the case. It was the little things, a stupid mistake, fall down, just stuff that you would not think would happen. If you go back through those film and tapes and you look and you'd say, my God, how many mistakes can we make in key situations? And then unsportsmanlike conduct, a jump offside. These little things in crisis moments can come home to haunt you. And I swear, I never saw a team do that. You ask the question, how do you stop it? You go out and you work and you become more conditioned to the fact that, guys, you're getting it done. They just got to clean up your mental approach, believe in yourselves, and stop with the silly mistake. That's what's killing them. If they can eliminate the silly mistakes, they'll be a pretty good football team next year, I really believe.
Jim Walden's with us, Hail Varsity Radio coach. We'll wind down with the carousel. And what has shocked you? What's your read and reaction to Lincoln Riley headed to the Pac-12? I know OU's not happy with him. I don't think there's a bridge left in Norman. And you have Brian Kelly headed down to LSU, which means OU and Notre Dame are open. You think old Matty Campbell makes a jump from Iowa State?
Well, I'll start with Matt. I don't know if Matt's going to go or not. I hope he doesn't. Boy, the hardest thing you've ever done, and Lincoln Riley may soon be going to figure that out. Don't leave where they love you, man. When you're making a ton of money at a school, you know you could, that a 9-win season is almost guaranteed. Not that I think that's the case at Oklahoma, but when you look at Oklahoma's history, they've been up into that range a long time, and they like this guy down there. And the reason they don't particularly like, I agree with you, Oklahoma's not used to being told you're second best. You don't leave Oklahoma and go anywhere, maybe to the pros, but it just happened. So I hope he better do a good job at USC because he won't be able to go back to Oklahoma anytime soon. But I'm just astounded, Smitty, at the amount of money these people are throwing around. That's the dumbest, overwhelming contract I've ever seen. So I don't know how to even express it. Maybe it's just stupid. Sometimes my dad used to say he's got more money than he's got sense. and or brains, whatever say. I think that might qualify for USC. Again, it's the same thing. Did you think you'd ever live long enough to see a guy leave Notre Dame, successful, winningest coach in history, and go to LA? Leave Notre Dame, go to LSU. Leave Oklahoma and go to USC. These are places you don't leave. You live your whole life trying to get to be a coach at one of those schools. So, but again, I would say to Matt Campbell, they love him in Iowa State. He's done a remarkable job. And, boy, think hard and long about leaving places where they love you. And that's all I can say. They're all making good money. It's hard to turn it down. But it's some strange things I never in my lifetime. I guess I'm glad I've lived long enough, to see this, but I never thought I'd ever live to see somebody leave Oklahoma and Notre Dame to go to other schools.
Jim Walden with us, Coach, Washington State, Iowa State, and, of course, longtime assistant for Coach Devaney. Coach, it's so much fun to get caught up with you, get your perspective, talk some ball. We'll do this again here as we get closer to bowl season, and thanks for giving us a few minutes.
Glad to do it. You guys have a wonderful Christmas season, okay?
Will do, Coach. You and the family the same.
All right.
Jimmy Walden right there. The gentleman will hit some hoops next. Andy Markowski on the way.
Pardon the interruption, but I'd like to save you some money. I'm Brandon Vogel, managing editor of Hail Varsity, and I wanted to offer listeners of this podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce, 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at hailvarsity.com. Just go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's hailvarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio. A big night for Nebraska men's and women's basketball. We bring on the Pride of Ord. Husker basketball standout Andy Markowski with us at Markowski_Andy on Twitter is where you find him. Andy, how many Freshman of the Week awards have you won?
That would be 0, Schmitty. So I was lucky to score a basket as a freshman. So that feels like a long time ago. I was just happy to sniff the court those years.
Well, I think you're probably pretty happy with Alexis, man. What a start to her career she's had.
Yeah, she's having a lot of fun. They've got a really talented group, and off to a great start. So she's a great teammate, happy to contribute. Hopefully they can keep things going with a tough game against Wake Forest tonight.
We'll hit Wake in Nebraska in a minute. Andy, what's been your read here? I know Nebraska's put some wins together for the men. Big challenge, Big Ten ACC showdown tonight. I know NC State's favored. As you've looked at this game a little bit here, what are some of your impressions about NC State? I know Tip's coming up here in less than an hour.
Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible matchup for Nebraska. I mean, NC State is, fairly long, athletic, likes to pressure defensively, which I think fits us, pretty well. I mean, our team is pretty athletic. There's times where we can have multiple ball handlers out on the court. Right now we're averaging only 10 turnovers a game, so we're doing a pretty good job of taking care of the ball. Their front line is not, real stout. It's 6'8", I think, 200 and 6'11", 2 1/4. So it's not like you're playing a real physical team that is going to just maul you on the backboard. They'll do it with more athleticism than they do just brute strength. So I think that fits us well. And, really it comes down to us, how we can play offensively. Our 3-point percentage, we're only making 6 a game, and we're under 30%. Those numbers have to improve if this team is going to be able to go on the road and beat, not only ACC teams, but Big Ten teams.
Yeah, and you talk about the three-point shooting percentage, and so far this year it's really felt like there's been a lid on the basket from three-point land, but it almost felt like the team started to turn a bit of a corner last game from Kisei Tominaga. He was getting hot from three, and it kind of felt like the team was feeding off of his confidence. Do you think that the three-point shooting can and will continue, or do you think that it's law of averages and eventually they'll start shooting the ball better?
Yeah, I think we have good shooters. I mean, sometimes you don't have good shooters, and you expect it to go in, and it never does. I do think we have players that can make open threes, can make unbalanced contested threes, or it comes from like an inside out penetration or a rebound kick out. So I do think that will improve. Because this team is never going to be a great team on the backboard to get extra possessions. So we're going to have to win the 3-point line. So I do think. That will improve even with scouting and defenses getting better. I think we are getting, the right look at the right time. We're still taking 5 to 6, I think, bad threes, whether it be off balance or we're kind of fading away threes that, you need to eliminate and make sure that, you're just taking the open three, which is hard enough to make at a college level. But, right now we're giving up 10 threes a game and only getting 6. And I would have never guessed that to be the case going into the season. I thought we could win the games, most games from at the 3-point line, at least have that be a stat category that before the game started, you thought you could win against most teams that we'd play on our schedule.
So Nebraska's got to be better at closeouts and at rotations, at communications, and in just guarding the three. Doc's, I know, had a little bit of a different role, but he's still kind of your defensive mind. What do you anticipate's gone on as they've geared up for this game tonight? Do you anticipate they put in some extra time at guarding that three? I mean, that's got to be part of the plan, correct, to take away some of those shots, those looks, those momentum swings, those big threes that teams have seemingly hit all season on Nebraska.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to change their defensive philosophy. They don't have a rim protector, so they play a very gap-oriented defense. So they do give up a lot of threes. Unfortunately for them, teams have made a lot. But if you look at the other side of it, I think we're top 1 or 2 in the conference in fouling, and then we're top 2 or 3 in the conference in terms of what teams are getting from the free throw line against us. So we're by being soft, you're giving up a little bit for the 3-point line, but you're also, protecting the lane and playing to your strengths in terms of not really having a, 6'10", 6'11" front line that can really protect the rim. So, I don't think their philosophy is going to change. I think in scouting, as this team matures, you have to understand who to get to make sure that we're running the really good shooters off the 3-point line and making them do something that maybe they're not as comfortable as doing. Up to this point, I don't think our scouting has been as good. We've left, key shooters open in transition. We've left some key shooters open on rotation where maybe you should have, faked that one guy and got over to the better shooter of the two. Just breakdowns like that I think through scouting and through just game minutes with a fairly young team, can help them maybe, run some of the better shooters off the 3-point line. But in general, we're going to give up a lot of threes just because that's the style that not only did Doc, incorporate, but that's the system that they have in place this season as well.
Well, Andy, another problem on top of just the open shooters has been the fact that it feels like about half the time that those three-pointers are missed, they're getting pulled down for an offensive rebound and an easy 2. Have you seen any development on the defensive rebounding side of things for the Huskers team since they're? I mean, we saw how badly they struggled early in the season. Have you seen any progress since then?
Yeah, I have. I think there's been a greater attention to it. Western Illinois really, embarrassed them and exposed them. But once again, you can practice rebounding all you want, and sometimes it comes down to size, length, athleticism. Things that we have enough of to compete on the backboard. I think we're -5 right now against inferior competition to what we're going to see in the Big Ten. So they're going to still have to have an attention to that. I don't know if we're going to out-rebound the best, rebounding teams in the Big Ten, but, you can't give up, -12, -15, we're not creating enough turnovers and finding another areas of the stat sheet to win those games if we're getting out rebounded by double-digit margins. So I have seen a greater attention to it, a greater effort from the guys, but still an area to, as you mentioned, that they're going to have to keep getting better at it and compete night in and night out if they want to be successful. What's the ask tonight for Bryce McGowan's? What's he need to do? Same with Verge. Who are a couple of keys in your mind for a win on the road? Yeah, Bryce has had a really good start to his career. I think sometimes fans have an unrealistic expectation when you start hearing 5-star and lottery pick. A lot of that is bank on potential, right? And they're looking at a 22 to 25-year-old, what is their ceiling? But Bryce has really found, different ways to score. He just has to keep playing, within himself, finding spots to get to the free throw line. Don't settle for threes. He's an okay three-point shooter right now, but he's much better for this team when he attacks and gets to the rim and draws fouls, gets the teams into the bonus. So he needs to be good. He's obviously one of our better players. Verge and Webster have to figure out kind of how to coexist, right? Webster tends to come in and distribute more, but yet isn't the offensive threat that Verge is in terms of getting downhill and creating maybe some help situations to get some of our three-point shooter shots. But this is a collaborative effort. Nebraska continues to need some bench support. They need Lat Mayan to get going a little bit. They need contributions from a lot of people to be able to go on the road and beat an okay ACC team. NC State, has been around 500 the last 2 or 3 years. I think we're 5-5 in the ACC Big Ten Challenge because we get teams that are a lot like us. So I think if we can go in and shore up the backboard and be efficient from the three-point line without turning it over, this is a game that we have a chance to be competitive and compete down the last couple minutes and win a close game. Eddie, let's flip over to the women as Nebraska is at Wake Forest. Some impressions here as this team's kind of continued to climb and a perfect mark for both teams. Give me a quick thought on what needs to happen tonight for Coach Williams and the crew is Wake's pretty athletic, pretty fast basketball team. Yeah, Wake is really good. Long, they have Spears, which was a freshman of the year in the ACC and on the USA under-19 team. So she'll be a handful. But the great thing about Coach Williams and her team, they've won a lot of different ways. They had 2 tough neutral or road games in California. One was a neutral, the other was on San Diego's home court. They're not playing their best basketball. Izzy Bourne, was an all Big Ten contributor last year, has not been consistent enough for him, and Habe has been in and out with the knee injury. She's been solid in the fourth quarter of Creighton and in the San Diego game. So the fact that they're 7-0, and in my opinion, 2 of their better players haven't been at the top of their game. They'll need to be better tonight. Jess Shelley is going to have to continually be good like she's been up to this point. And, it's a game that, on paper, we're probably underdog going on the road against a team that was in the NCAA tournament a year ago. But, if we can be competitive or find a way to win this game, I think it's going to tell you that the women's team is pretty good. What's this team's strength? If you had to pinpoint one attribute or label for the women's team this early in the year, what stuck out to you? Well, they're really versatile. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of different style of players that you can kind of mix and match through how a game is being played or a certain style or a certain matchup. I don't know if they're going to keep playing 13 players, all season, but that just tells you the depth and the versatility that they have, that 13 have really played, even in competitive games. Amy's been able to get 13 players into the game. So, I think that they're a team. They understand their roles. They play for each other. They're hungry. They're a pretty competitive group. I think all those things have allowed them to get off to a good start, but they have to keep improving as the schedule. Not only is it Wake Forest tonight, they go, at Minnesota on Monday, which is their first conference game, which is never, an easy place to start on the conference road. So they have some tough games coming up, but so far their versatility and just their togetherness and toughness, I think, has separated them from their competition. Andy Markowski, the Pride of Ord, Husker basketball standout. Andy, awesome to get your breakdown and some thoughts. Thanks for joining us today, bud. All right, thanks, Chris.
Eddie Markowski with us, Hail Varsity Radio, winding down, getting ready for Nebraska and NC State, Nebraska and Wake Forest, men's and women's basketball tonight. Jock Doc's on the way, loaded show for you today, and we'll tell you about Thursday on the way with Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Like what you hear, high-quality radio and podcast is part of what we do at Hail Varsity. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity Radio, and I wanted to offer listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio listen?
On Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back into it at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday, Lincoln Orthopedic Center, and Dr. Ben Woodhead with us. Dr. Ben, how's your week going? Good to spend time with you.
Absolutely. You too, Chris. It's going good so far. This weather's fantastic.
That is code for you and I need to converge and find a way to go swing the clubs. I don't know if it can happen for either of us, man, but
we need to try and make it work, though.
Oh, for sure. And, I don't know how Aaron Rodgers is going to be off the tee box with that bum foot, but let's spend a little bit of time here on Aaron Rodgers. We're a week removed from him plopping his foot up in front of the camera. Look, my foot's messed up, but they held on last weekend. But give me your synopsis here on what Aaron Rodgers is going through with his foot and long-term potential injury here. How do you look at him moving forward this season?
Yeah, so these fractures of the foot, that pinky toe, certainly can be kind of a long-standing type of nagging injury. The good thing is, though, is that very rarely do these types of injuries ever need like a surgical fix or anything like that. Sometimes they'll actually have to put it back into alignment, but usually they stay in place. You can even buddy tape them like you do with the finger. And then you basically wait for them to heal. But if you've ever heard of anything like turf toe or some of these nagging toe and foot injuries, they can last a long time and certainly cause some functional issues. But the good news is that it will heal, and uneventfully he should be able to get back to all activities.
Dr. Ben Woodhead with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Aaron Rodgers, and you look at what he's going through with that pinky toe and the fracture there. I think of turf toe, and I think of some really horrible cases where you can't believe guys played through it. This is a little different. What's the pain tolerance got to be for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, and are we looking at something that's going to that will eventually affect his mobility the more he's on his feet? Because that's what's so special about him: his arm talent, his intellect, and he is so mobile. He's just so good at staying alive in the pocket. He's really great at doing it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that sets him apart, from a lot of the quarterbacks in the league. And so, he's certainly going to know about it from a stance standpoint, from throwing, planting. It's certainly going to be problematic as this takes 6 to 8 weeks to heal. And he's a little bit at a disadvantage because he's in the season. And so it's going to be hard for him to sit out for a 6 to 8 weeks. So he's probably going to go back and, he certainly will irritate it, but he's the type of guy that I think will just continue to play through it. He's tough as nails. And so, I don't think we'll notice whether he's having much of an issue on it at all.
Dr. Ben, during the week, what's the practice regimen like? How much is Aaron Rodgers going to be on his feet and off of his feet as he has to stay sharp and ready for Sunday?
Yeah, absolutely. If I were speculating on what the team docs were doing, I would say they probably won't have him do much contact or running at all. They'll probably keep him off his feet as much as possible, let him rest, let it chill out and kind of heal as much as it can. and then let him be ready for game time. He's certainly going to be taking mental snaps, film and all that, but I would imagine the physical activity that he's going to be doing is kind of kept to a minimum.
That makes a lot of sense. And have you ever had to do or know anyone that's done a surgical intervention on a situation like this?
It's pretty uncommon on a pinky toe. If it's a bigger toe or if it's pointing completely in the opposite direction, sometimes the foot and ankle surgeons will actually have to put a pin across it or a screw across it. It's really not as common. Sometimes, like in the turf toe type of incidents, you can certainly have some ligament issues that sometimes will have to rarely be taken care of. But really the issue with a lot of these injuries, it's a time thing. And if you talk to anybody that's ever had a turf toe injury, it can be debilitating for quite a bit of time. So that's, I think, his biggest issue is that he's always on his feet. You're never really getting to rest that much. And so, it really is just letting that injury scar in and heal and gradually get back to normal.
Dr. Ben Woodhead's with us. A few more minutes here on Aaron Rodgers, a Jock Doc Wednesday, Lincoln Orthopedic Center. Do we know for sure how this happened? Because it was during COVID he had this injury. That's when it happened, right? The pinky toe during the COVID quarantine. From
what I understood, yeah, and that's why I know some speculation that he had a COVID toe, that you hear about. But, I don't think we exactly know when it happened.
So it's as simple as it's the middle of the night. You either get up to use the restroom or check on the kids, and you hit the side of the door. Are we talking one of those incidents?
Honestly, that certainly could be one of the things one of the reasons that it did happen, because that's when your foot is not protected. You don't have a shoe on it. It's a less common injury to happen when you're actually in a shoe playing football and your foot is protected. And so it certainly could have happened at any time of the day when he's walking around the house and missed a step. That's an injury that can happen on a regular basis. Doesn't necessarily have to be in a football game.
Dr. Ben, what are some of the testing measurements and protocol that the team docs are going to do as they continue to gauge Rodgers' recovery and mobility? What are some of the tests and checking you do as a doctor to make sure he's good for Sunday?
I'm sure they got x-rays right away. And, if they get an x-ray right before he goes back, just to make sure that fracture's still in alignment. But, Aaron's going to probably tell them that he has very little pain and he's ready to get back. And, that's probably what they're going to go by in terms of whether they let him play or not. If he can function normal, if they buddy tape the toes and he looks like he is at near 100%, they're probably going to let him go full throttle.
So, Dr. Ben, is there an injection that can happen? Is there spray? What's some management tools?
Yeah, so, you always hear about all these steroid injections for NFL athletes, and this is certainly not a situation where you would give somebody a steroid. Sometimes a steroid can actually impede healing a little bit. Wow. So no real area that you can actually inject. The fracture will heal over time. But, his best friend is going to be rest, ice, anti-inflammatories, and letting his body just take over for the healing process.
Dr. Ben Woodhead with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Aaron Rodgers and, of course, that turf toe, that fractured pinky toe. And we've all bumped our toes one time or another. This is a whole different animal. And then you factor in those monsters off the edge. I was kind of waiting, Dr. Ben, for Von Miller to, oops, I stepped on your toe, Aaron. That's got to be like whack-a-mole going on when he's back in the pocket, right? Those big defensive linemen trying to accidentally step on him.
Absolutely, or just falling on it. Those guys are mammoths, so anything could do that.
Dr. Ben, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for the time today.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks a lot. My pleasure.
Good stuff from Ben Woodhead, Dr. Ben Woodhead, Lincoln Orthopedic Center, Jock Doc Wednesday. Aaron Rodgers was good enough to get it done last Sunday, but this thing will no doubt linger a bit. Nebraska, NC State, the line is 6.5. We'll predict here shortly, and I don't know if I'm going to go steak and a beer with Elijah Herbal on this or not. because, yes, I am cowardly. I don't want to fall too many steaks and beers behind Elijah. But a couple of quick thoughts as we wind down Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Like what you hear? High-quality radio and podcasts are just part of what we do at Hail Varsity. I'm Brandon Vogel, managing editor, and I wanted to offer listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we do. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at hailvarsity.com. Just go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's hailvarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, NC State's favored by about 6.5. A couple of quick thoughts here. NC State loves to be in your shorts, and that's not a grotesque take. It's they're a pressure defense. Elijah, you look shocked and stunned.
Yeah, maybe I need to get over to Raleigh soon.
Right?
NC State likes being in their shorts. Okay.
Opponents. Shorts. Listen, take care of the basketball. Obviously, rebounding is 1A, 1B, 1C. Be good about what shots you take. Possessions matter. Bad shots, horrible possessions, feed a crowd. You know the momentum thing. That's really it. Walker's been so good. You've been able to go through the offense with him and get better looks with when you find him in the high post and he can kick. Nebraska's been good when they've hit shots, inside-out rhythm, clearly. Get a post touch and a kick out. And then you have some guys that can do special things with Bryce and even Verge. I was talking to a coach over the weekend, and he made this comment. He's like, the happiest guy in America is Bobby Hurley. Like, really? Why is that? Well, he doesn't have Verge on his bench anymore. I don't know. This would be big. We'll know more about Nebraska. How do they continue to handle adversity? Because you'll face a lot of it. They could also jump out to a great start. They could play smart basketball. They could out-talent NC State. It's really kind of up to them and their approach. I think the game plan's going to be nails. I don't have any doubt Fred put a good game plan together. Comes down to execution, basketball IQ, and role acceptance. So we'll have some thoughts on Nebraska basketball, NC State tomorrow. More on the coaching search for Nebraska. Elijah, what'd you make of Mickey Joseph's tweet that was quote tweeted about 5 minutes ago?
Well, yeah, he was talking about Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Said, the culture.
LSU DNA.
I'll paraphrase. He said that the culture in this room is different than anywhere else. That's essentially what he was trying to say with his tweet, which I think is saying you're going to be staying at LSU, right? That seems like a recruiting tweet of sorts. Whenever you're talking about your own wide receiver room, and you're saying, this room is different, not this is me as a coach. I'm building these players. It's saying this LSU wide receiver room is different. So that I read into that, and I don't want to read too far into it, but my initial reaction to that is, well, he's staying at LSU.
What is your prediction tonight? NC State in a romp. NC State by about 10. One possession ball game. I think Nebraska probably loses by about 10 or 11.
I'm going the other way. I think Nebraska wins by about 10 or 11.
Seriously?
NC State is not, defensively, they're not a Big Ten team. They have lost their best big man in Manny Bates for the season. He's out. He had shoulder surgery. So I'm going to be taking Nebraska straight up in this one to win. I think they have a bit of a lead. NC State gives them a scare late, but I think they ice it down the stretch with free throws and win by, I'd say, somewhere in that 8 to 12 point range.
Elijah Herbal. Is this hope or belief?
The Big Ten has been pretty dominant in the ACC challenge, the Big Ten ACC challenge this year. I think it continues tonight in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Well, if your heart's broken on the hardwood tonight, you blame the big kid at left tackle. Elijah Herbal says a straight-up double-digit win for Nebraska. Hope he's right. Have a good one tomorrow. Searles, Barney, and Brandon Vogel.
A Hurrdat Media Production.